When we talk about business transformation, the conversation often revolves around strategy, technology, and growth. But behind every successful transformation are people, their mindset, their leadership, and their ability to adapt to change. As organizations navigate an increasingly complex world, perhaps the biggest differentiator is not what just businesses do, but how leaders inspire people to move forward. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Leadership Lounge with the CEO magazine. I am Shweta, and today I am delighted to be joined by Dr. Anupama Vaidya, the founder of Los Oricus. She is also a business strategist, an independent director, and a leadership transformation expert with over 3 decades of experience helping organizations and leaders navigate change. Let's welcome Dr. Vaidya. Ma'am, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. How have you been?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's equally a pleasure to me to have this conversation with you, Shweta. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, the thing that I find very interesting about your journey is that you have had such a fascinating career. You started with studying computer science, led transformation initiatives, advised boards, and are now mentoring business leaders. So, if you look back today, what would you say has been the common thread connecting all these different chapters?
So, yes, looking back, Shweta, into my own career, I kind of wonder how what brought me out over here. And when you're asking this question, it makes me reflect on what's that defining thread. And I think so. One defining thread is about reinventing myself, uh, not as a deliberate act, but whenever I kind of came across it, I've never adapted to the change. I chose to be someone new each time. When I wanted to do medical, I landed up doing computer science, but then took it as a very positive challenge. And I said, hey, whichever field I go, I'll do the best. I entered for finance in management, landed up doing HR because of a mentor who advised me that I could really work in this space very well in the early days of HR. So again, I chose to be new each time. So I think so that's a defining thread between my entire career. The this defining redefinition required me to be very curious, learning all the time, and ensuring that I have the humility as well as the confidence, both of these things remaining side by side as I progress through my life.
Was there a particular moment in your career when you realized that what truly excited you was not just managing people, but helping businesses transform through people?
So I think so, Shweta, when we are talking about this people and business and all that part of it, I think so. My reinvention had taken me through my own journey when I said I was wanting to do finance, but I landed up doing HR. And I joined an organization to be an HR generalist. And when I was doing all that, it was not that I wanted to be an HR person. I think so, right from the moment, it was always about being a business person, handling a certain business strategy. Okay,
Okay.
and which goes with people, and people being my forte, understanding them, being able to walk that journey with them always remained at the core of my heart. Now during my sabbatical, when I was kind of after I kind of delivered my daughter Ishita, and when that was happening and I had to take a break, I was handholding a few small and medium enterprises where I saw a lot of my contribution of work going in that direction of my passion. And I think so that's where I realized that it's not only about a functional contribution of people management, but a business and a intersection is where I truly enjoy my work. And that's how I took that into my corporate life once I came back to my corporate life and then got a little restless. I would say trying to find a meaning of the work that I was doing. And that's where I would call my ikigai, where I stepped out from a full time role to say, okay, let me make a difference to founder led organizations where this intersection between the business and people really, truly, truly matter in a very big way. Okay. And that's where Around 8.5 years back, I kind of started this firm called Los Oricas. It means the charioteers. It means about hand holding organizations, founder led organizations to be able to rediscover themselves. So that's how I kind of work in the space of the intersection of business strategy and the people strategy.
Okay. Okay, that's very interesting. So, you have often said that businesses transform when people, purpose, and performance move together. So, how did this philosophy take shape?
I would say this traces back to my early days when I started seeing as a management trainee, I started looking at what an organization is all about. I started discovering how results come in, how does the performance of an organization come in real time. Everything was more theoretical when you are in the education system. And that's where my first encounter to see, okay, what happens when best of the thoughts and ideas are on the table, but you do not have the right people dynamics being able to hold it. And that happens when you do not understand why you're doing something. Okay. And that's my early exposure with which I started looking at the entire organization as a living ecosystem, which brings the purpose, the processes, the performance, people, everything together to ensure that this ecosystem together delivers that vision or the idea that it has started on, it has embarked on. And time and again, it's proven, and today also when I work with a lot of founders, they come back to me saying, okay, we have the best of the markets, we have the best of the demand from the markets. I've got real good products which I will keep on innovating. What holds them back? And any conversation that I've had in the last few years is all about people, people, and people. How do I ensure that they align with what I want and deliver it optimally towards it? So that's where the performance comes in. So creating that shared purpose with people to be able to deliver the performance is how I've been experiencing it. And that's where this philosophy comes in completely.
Okay. So throughout your career, you have worked with multinational corporations, founder led businesses, and now as an independent director, you are also working with boards. So, what differences do you see in how each one of them approaches leadership and transformation?
I think so. That's something very interesting I did with my career. I think so. There were some conscious moves when I did that to ensure that I get a very diverse experience, right, from conglomerates, MNCs, founder led organizations, then to be able to step into such board led positions. And each one of them have left a very lasting learning onto me. And they continue to actually train me and groom me. I would say my learning has never stopped. So if I look at my multinationals experience, I think so they have taught me about systems and scale. So they move a little slow compared to what I would have really loved to work. And that's where I stepped out of some of these multinationals. They're more layered decision making. The most interesting part of it is the human shortfalls that happen. Okay. They beautifully compensate it with processes, principle based working, frameworks, and ensure that it's not individual dependent or person dependent. So the entire system is moving in a certain rhythmic manner, even with or without people who are capable to do it. Whereas in founder led organizations, what I've really loved over the years and that excites me is the speed, conviction, and experimentation. It's like if I compare between an MNC and a founder led organization, you're making the recipe on the go. You're in the kitchen and you're kind of saying, okay, let me put some kind of a masala here, let me put a tinge out over there and see how the taste improvises. Whereas in an MNC, you have the recipe book and you're kind of following that for a very consistent and predictable result. So I think so. I see this too as a difference. But this is, I would say, the founder led organizations with the way they operate. That's why Los Origas and my entire vision came into existence. And the third area is where I'm talking about boards. When I sit on the board, my entire persona has to undergo a change. What I do in my transformation, I cannot do it as a part of the board because you're not actually building anything directly. It's about listening. It's about picking up what's left unsaid. You're asking the right questions to leave an insight with the team. So if I have to summarize it in one line, I would say MNCs teach scale, founders teach conviction, and boards actually have taught me restraint. I think so that's the difference between the three leaderships and transformations that take place whenever I have participated in these areas.
Okay. So after so many decades in corporate leadership, what actually inspired you to establish your own firm, and what gap were you trying to fill?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. And I've been time and again asked because I was a part of a very top leadership team of the India team in the last organization, a full time assignment, enjoying doing good work, exciting work, all that piece of it was there. But somewhere I felt ki an organization of that size and scale can, if whether it's me or whether it's anybody else, as I said about the MNCs, it will keep on absorbing what you can give and keep on growing. My earliest stint when I had taken the sabbatical, as I had mentioned, that's where I'd seen organizations, the small and medium enterprises, lacking that kind of an exposure. They have the right intent, they want to grow, they want to do everything. But professionals like us are kind of occupying roles at very large organizations. So that disconnect of our expertise and experience being available to these small and medium enterprises uh, was the gap that I was seeing. Now the gap will also became bigger because they couldn't afford professionals like us full time. One, the affordability. Not second, not knowing how to kind of utilize us in those roles. And third is maybe there was not a full time position for somebody like me to feel that fulfillment of yes, you can be there full time and do something with this SMEs. And I think so that's where I found a space between my past experience to the current one to say, okay, can I really look at making myself available maybe a few hours a month or a few days a month to some of these small and medium enterprises where we are talking about Make in India, we're talking about Viksit Bharat, we're talking about strengthening a certain strata of our manufacturing, engineering services size of businesses. These are all the enterprises which are really going to become big one day. But they will become big only when they are handheld towards it. And that experience and expertise, while there are a lot of consulting, etc., available, I don't call myself as a consultant. I call myself and my organization as a boutique firm who handshold you, partners with you, and I'm inside every organization to ensure that they feel that I'm not an outsider. I'm inside along with you to walk that path together. Okay. So this is where I established Los Oregas and I kind of came through for the last 8.5 years where it's really fulfilling to see that those droplets of work that you're doing or the kind of work that immersion with which you're kind of partnering with these founders is leading to a certain story narrative for their own vision board. So that's how I kind of took this courageous step, took it, and there's been no look back. It's been really fulfilling to see um, the ability to be able to make an impact on these founder led organizations. So I realized that you don't need to be full time in someone's business to be foundational to it. It's upon how you kind of partner with them, how do you kind of engage with them, and you go beyond a mandate to really make a significant and an impactful difference. And I think so that is the underlying thought process behind what I stepped into.
Okay. So, ma'am, you mentioned that sometimes when a founder or CEO comes to you, they say that we have the product, we have the, execution strategy, and we have the market. But what do you think they're actually struggling with? Is it strategy, people, culture, or is it usually something more deeper than this?
Shweta, when I kind of look at these organizations, I would say it's sometimes really mesmerizing. I really find it's very awestruck when I see the background with which many of these founders have come with zero experience of the corporate world and yet made some business out of it. Okay. Really admire it for where they have come from. So for me, it's like a diamond, it's like an unpolished diamond. There is something core as a strength that they have. And if you have to increase the caratage of that diamond, you have to have the right cuts and polish, etc. Giving the right
Yeah.
cuts is very important. But that core is very crucial for them. So while that core remains with them, I think so it's not about just the strategy or just about the execution. It is the entire way this organizational strength is built. And that's where I kind of define it in the form of a E8X transformation model. And where do they go wrong? They they may know what to do, but how to do? Are they very explicit? Do they state the expectations very clearly? Many times it's all in the mind. Okay, so it's a fuzzy logic which only they are able to understand. But then there is someone else on whom they're dependent to convert that fuzzy logic into real time actions. So, no matter whether the strategy is there, if first of all, they may not formalize a strategy because that is not formalized, the people who are kind of working with them or the processes that are working with them do not understand it in totality or in a holistic manner to convert it into real time execution actions. So everything starts becoming more suboptimal. Alongside with that, a lot of misunderstanding, communication gaps take place. And that's where the culture and engagement and human dynamics actually again bring a suboptimal aspect. So, with expectations being a fuzzy logic, execution not being in a very formal, methodical, or a systemic manner. Okay, so you're not bringing excellence into it. The enthusiasm of people is kind of partly nudged, okay, because they're not able to align to the common goal. The capacity of the organization, what you need, how many people you need, what kind of processes, what kind of roles do you need, that is not defined. There's no architecture to it, like building a side certain kind of a house. When you build a house, you create a blueprint and then you start constructing. So I think so all that fuzzy logic really remains in one person's mind. So there is no planning, organizing, monitoring. So execution is more like on the go. Okay. Yeah. And that's where, with lack of communication, where you're not aligning the energies of people, or the culture starts getting impacted. And that's where the entire ecosystem starts working very, very suboptimally. So it's a combination of everything that you mentioned. And how do you get it right? By systemically breaking it down into pieces of expectations, execution discipline, the enthusiasm of people, the enabling people to do things, or building an ecosystem alongside with your organization, creating a culture through empowerment. All these things have to be governed together and brought into play in a very formal manner. That's when the strategy becomes real time execution. Otherwise, it's more of a aspiration rather than conversion into reality.
Yes. Okay. So in your experience of working closely with so many successful founders and CEO, is there one leadership mistake that even very capable people tend to make repeatedly?
I think so. I could write a complete next research thesis on that part of it. And not single mistake. There are many such mistakes that happen, and one leads to the other. But if I have to name one top mistake, is the not knowing when to let go. Okay. In fact, recently when my daughter turned 25, I had written a series of blogs on my 25 lessons of motherhood. And one lesson that really remained with me was letting go. It's like when your child is kind of growing from one phase to the other, and you needed to know when to let go, okay, and move from a parent to a custodian to a certain different role. The child starts walking when you're not very sure when to leave the hand, okay, but one day you have to leave it. So there's no right time or wrong time. And that's exactly one thing that leaders forget, that their organization or their people, everything is growing. And at one point of time, they have to let go. And to let go, they have to be able to invest and the back end to ensure that they are making that organization capable for them to let go. And this requires a lot of conscious effort. It requires a lot of thought leadership. It requires thinking slow. Okay, I love this book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Slow, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. Okay, where he talks about there is time, entrepreneurs or founders, in the speed and conviction to do things, they are very fast in delivering, okay, wanting to make things. And that's the reason they've moved to a certain level. But after some time, they have to take those pauses, and to once they take the pause, they'll be able to know when to let go, how to prepare to let go also. And I think so that's one mistake that I see commonly across leadership to that extent completely.
Okay.
So if I have to just kind of give it a little bit of a thought process, to let go requires courage and a belief in the entire system around you. If you have not invested into it, definitely you're going to hold back, and the entire organization is going to be only you centric. Okay.
Yes. Okay. One aspect that really differentiates your work is how you bring behavioral science and neuroscience into leadership conversations. So, for someone hearing that for the first time, how does understanding the brain actually help someone become a better leader?
I think so. Let me describe an example to you out over here, Shweta. And I think so that would be. So I was working with this founder and a very, very high risk taking and absolutely network person. Uh, you name it, and he'll actually be able to convert any situation into an opportunity, any problem into an opportunity, and make things happen. Now, this entire thing was when I was working with him, we realized that his own team was not able to understand him. Okay. Where he had so many good strengths. So that's where I sat down with him to understand the business. And I took various business situations to help him understand how his entire leadership behaviors through the lens of neuroscience happens. So I use this model called my brain indicator of neurological dominance, which is a very interesting model which talks about not only your left brain, right brain, but also your top and the bottom. So there's a full model around it. And I simplified it to say why you are the way you are, why you're able to take risk while somebody else is not able to take a risk. These two things are different parts of the brain which really take it. And that's where connecting your situation to your behavior to your brain and simplifying that biology in a very simple language is with which I helped him see his own persona and why his certain strengths are helping him build the business, and why those strengths actually, when he plays it inside the organization, become a bottleneck for him. And once he was able to relate, and this is just one of the many examples that I've kind of used over a period of time. So brain actually there, through the research that has happened over the years, neuroscience has given us that kind of a flavor of how it's not about the observed behavior, but our brains provide us that entire preferential behavior. The more you use a part, the more the chemical reactions you understand why you are the way you are. And I think so that piece of it linking with the certain performance parameters that you need actually helps optimally grow you and explore your potential. So that's how I use it in the very simple sessions in my coaching or in my grooming with all the work that I'm doing. I hope so that kind of gives you a flavor, or it's confusing. I'm not very sure.
No, no. But does it actually help?
Yes, it does. It does. And I think so. The real essence is when you experience it. Okay. So, when the moment, say, for example, I'm in a meeting and I'm kind of talking about it and I understand. Like, for example, a lot of HR people come with a lot of feeling, okay, saying, I think so. I feel we should do an engagement initiative for the entire organization because they're talking of very enthusiastic, they're very realistic about it. And the business leader or the CEO says, oh, so what will it cost? Now you realize these are two different dimensions with which both of them are talking the same language, but operating from two different zones. One is talking from a feeling zone, which is your right bottom. The other is talking from your left top, which is your critical zone. So when I'm as an HR person going and talking to the CEO, if I'm able to show an ROI based proposal, okay, or give certain logic to it, there's no dispute. So on one side there's empathy, on the other side there's a critical thinking. On one side there's ideation, on the other side there's a very detailed program management. And four different zones of our brain actually use it. So I had a marketing head who was full of ideas, but the CEO had a problem that he was not able to convert those ideas into real time action. So then what we did was, in the work, once I started studying this entire gap, we actually paired him up with a project manager who could convert those ideas and take it into action. And that's how we brought a bandwidth to ensure that the performance was up for the team. So this is how we use neuroscience in real time in the work that we do. So assessing teams, understanding personas, understanding what performance is required, what the role demands. A role may demand a lot of logical thinking, but I may be thinking very emotionally. So I had a pair of a father-son duo, and I'll give you this example, which will definitely give you an insight of how neuroscience really helped. So this father-son duo, I used to kind of go and have regular sessions of understanding their dilemmas and situations, what worked well or what something's upcoming and how do they do it differently. So my coaching style is a little different. It's more situation based, dilemma based, with which I have these conversations. So a couple of times I went and they say, "Oh, bad luck, we lost one more order." I said, "What is this bad luck?" So I sat down with them and I had done their profiling, and both of their profiling showed their critical zone was very preference was very low. They were either emotional or full of ideas. The father was more program oriented, very detail oriented, with a lot of feel for people. The son was full of ideas, raring to go, risk taking. But the critical thinking or the reasoning logic, both of them did not have a preference. Okay. So when they said bad luck, then I sat down and I started taking those two examples as a case study, and I put a root cause analysis. And I found out at what point of time they could have identified that this proposal will not go through. Okay. And believe it, they realize, oh, if we do this at a regular interval proactively when we are in the midst of this thing, so a bit of logical model was brought into it. Now, they wouldn't have understood logic if I wouldn't have initially told them about the gap in their logic. Okay, they don't have a preference. दिमाग में ही नहीं आता है. Okay, कि ऐसे सोच सकते critically. So we gave a framework to the gap in their preference, and that's after that it became a winning spree for them. So this is how neuroscience, leadership, and business all can be brought in together. I'm sure this would be an exciting example to think through.
Of course. So working with all level of leadership, I would say, do you think that leadership can actually be taught, or are there qualities that only life experiences can develop?
I think so. That's definitely something very person dependent. Okay. And while work in the space of leadership, I'll put this very simple statement: the guru appears when the student is ready. Okay. So that's where I'm saying it's very person dependent. So no matter what state, whether you're in an individual leadership or you're in a people leadership or you're in a business leadership, if you're ready to learn every day, okay, then no matter what you're doing, where you are, leadership is a continuous evolution process. The moment you kind of say, "Oh, I've been there, done that, I know how to do it," that is where leadership development starts getting compromised and your leadership starts becoming suboptimal. So many a times I talk about a lot of middle managers, who are aspiring to become senior managers. They get stuck in a liminal space. Liminal is that Trishanku. They feel they're ready for senior leadership. Senior leaders feel they're yet to come to that level. And that's where this entire leadership development starts with self. Your ability to reflect, and that ability to reflect will only happen when you're ready for having very candid conversations, when you're ready to bite that bitter pills. Okay. Someone who there's someone who's interested to really give you deep insights. I wouldn't call it feedback. Okay. I would call it more of insights to help you discover what you're doing is really helping you move forward or holding you from reaching that next level. Okay. And that's where leadership development starts with self. And then that curiosity, that learning ability, then you go all out to keep on reinventing yourself. Okay. That's where you take help. You talk about your vulnerabilities. You talk about, you ensure that you do not think that you know it all. And that's where you are able to expressing, "Hey, I don't know how to do this." And a lot of founders that I'm working with, I'll tell you, Shweta, really admire them where they come back with their shortfalls and have those kind of discussions saying, "I'm unable to understand how to do this. Please help me." I think so. The remaining organization needs to exactly learn what their founders are learning. that candor, that candid conversation. And that changes the game of leadership development completely. Then every program is a framework that is available. There are so many courses, there are so many coaches available, everything is available. Okay. But the primary start point is your own ability to be able to say, hey, I'm ready to receive it. Everything will flow to you.
Right. It takes, I think it takes a lot even to admit that they can't do something. So the first step always had to be that.
True.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you have often spoken about rebuilding your life through personal and professional challenges. So how did those experiences shape your perspective on leadership and resilience?
For me, life has been its own teacher in every form and way, including when I kind of took certain decisions of ensuring that life is big. Better side of life is visible to me. I stepped out and became a single mother, took some professional decisions, etc. And I think so that kept on happening time and again. But those, I can sum it up with saying it was not about absence of vulnerability in any of these cases. For me, resilience, the way I've kind of been able to stand back in life after every difficult event that I went through, or phase, more than event, I will say phase that I went through. The resilience came through knowing that how to continue when even the path is not visible. Okay. I didn't know what the future is going to look like. And that's where believing in that, having that faith, having that kind of strength to say, okay, I have my ecosystem with me. I have my humility with me to keep on learning. I don't mind asking for help. Okay. All these factors make a lot of difference when you're talking about resilience. The moment you kind of hold back yourself and you kind of hold back your vulnerabilities and you feel okay, your vulnerabilities can be misunderstood, you can be seen as weak. I think so that actually starts kind of eroding you. So our circumstances may shape a chapter of our life. Okay. But I close those chapters, but they don't get to write the whole story. So sometimes you have to open new chapters, write new stories, look at life as a beautiful gift. It's a once lifetime that you have. And how do you write new chapters which really kind of take the lessons from the past chapters without, I would say, mulling over them, crying over them, regretting over them, saying, okay, that chapter had to be in that form. Let me move ahead. Let me shape my life. Today is a new, fresh day from the remaining of my life. Okay, I think so. That's really helped me as a leadership, at an individual leadership, which then got translated into a people leadership demonstration also.
Okay. So one thing also I would like to understand is that we have seen AI changing the way organizations work and how leaders make decisions and even how they hire people. So in a world that is becoming technologically intelligent, what do you think will become even more valuable for from a human leadership perspective?
That question is so rightly timed, Shweta, I would say. Uh, when everybody's talking about AI, technology, and everybody's feeling threatened, or is AI going to take my job? Again, I go back to my first answer of reinvention. I think so. Everything is going to get reinvented, and the readiness to be that is going to be very important. Okay. So, in the world of AI, if I have to really talk about whom the future will belong to, it will be people who are ready to reinvent and to be able to reinvent what is absolutely required is empathy and wisdom. Okay. So, on one side, you're talking about technology, on the other side, you're talking empathy. And empathy is not about feeling bad or something like that, it's about understanding the situation and then being able to work through it to reinvent yourself. Okay. And that's the wisdom. You have the knowledge. If I have to look at wisdom, I look at it this. You have the knowledge, you have the information, but applying that in the current situation or the evolving situation is wisdom. I love to give analogies, as you know. So it's like you have a gun, you know what the gun is used for, all that is there. The question is, the wisdom would be, why do you need to even use that gun? Okay.
Right.
And that's the difference between the empathy and wisdom is going to be at an elevated pitch when AI is becoming so integral to our lives. So rather than being scared about it, How do you make it augment whatever you're doing and walk that journey together? I've been kind of definitely augmenting a lot of the things that I'm doing with AI, and that couldn't have been done without the empathy and the wisdom and a lot of thought leadership with which I've been walking this journey. Okay, so it's not going to replace you; it's only going to strengthen you. How? It's upon that wisdom that you're going to bring onto the table. And
Okay.
that's where the hand holding will happen in a big way as you go forward.
Okay. So you have mentored professionals across different stages of their careers. So what separates leaders who continue to grow from those who stop evolving?
So those who there's a plethora of leaders. So on one side, I have a mentee who is a Gen Z, who's a 22, 23-year old whom I'm mentoring. On the other side, I have founders who are, I would say their age would be 65 plus also. Okay. You have middle managers, you have CXOs. So the diversity of this kind of leadership that is available. And I call again to reiterate, leadership is not about business leadership or people leadership. It's even your own self leadership. Okay.
Right.
And preparing to ensure that their entire life really matters in the true selves. So, if I have to look at one very interesting spectrum across my mentoring, is where I see where there's a lot of curiosity and there's a humility to say, hey, I'm confused. Okay. So curiosity, confusions, and acceptance of those two coexistence makes a lot of difference towards leadership development. Okay.
Yeah.
And those who really work in the space of expressing their confusions with the curiosity actually bring in that conviction towards and the courage to really grow. Okay. So for me, that becomes a very, very brilliant leadership when you have these four C's: curiosity, courage, confusions, and conviction. So for me, that becomes that journey which takes the leader to the real leadership. Where it really gets impacted is when you start looking at, okay, number of years, I've been there, done that, and you stop learning. Okay. uh, every day morning when you get up and you say it's a fresh day, till yesterday whatever I learned is more like available to me as a tool or a framework, but today something new is going to get thrown. When COVID came, no, none of us had handled something like that before. So we
Right.
all kind of learned something new. From our past we took something, from the existing time we took something new, and we kept on building. Okay. And that's the piece of learning that every leader needs to get through without any biases of I am what I am kind of a thing. That
Okay.
will be my message. Yeah.
Okay, so you must meet this kind of people too who may have asked you to come and help them and are not ready to accept your help, saying that I don't need to change or we don't need to do this. So, how do you handle those?
So one thing is, for me, it's not about telling that you need change. Okay.
Okay.
For me, it's about helping that person discover. So if even if I'm not continued a certain mentoring because I see it's more of a full glass, okay, they don't want to change, but they want to change the entire organization. Okay. For me, it's the bitter pill needs to be taken by founders or the leaders first before they're expecting. In fact, there have been times when I've had life coaching between a father and a son. Okay. Where the father has brought the son to me saying, okay, hey, there seems to be some problem with my son. Can you have a conversation? And when I have a conversation with the son, so much gets spilled that I know what needs to be fine tuned at the father's level to be able to work or have that kind of a relationship with the son. And believe it, when this kind of thing comes onto the table and you help that discovery phase, it's not about telling you're right or wrong, it's about walking that journey. So when I've had such tough cases where people felt, okay, I don't need a change, the only thing the way I walk that journey is to help ask the right questions and leave a certain thought. Maybe today they may not be ready, but these have been turnarounds who have come back to me after 3 months, 6 months saying, I think so, you really made sense at that point of time. I need to really relook at the way I'm handling things completely. Okay. And that's how I kind of progress. Finally, there are a few cases, God bless them, I leave it. Okay. Because in we say ki don't pour water where on a pot that has been inverted. Okay. If it's not ready to receive, they're not going to get it also
Yeah.
completely.
Okay. So if you could change one mindset that exists in today's corporate world, what would it be and why?
I'm taking a pause for a minute.
Sure.
I'm okay, Shweta?
Yes. Yeah.
So, if I had to change one mindset in the corporate world today, I think so. The mistake that everybody makes for motion for progress, okay, where efforts versus outcome are taken as the same understanding. So that mindset is something I would keep on loving to look at it. It's like the other day when I was conducting a session and I said, what's when somebody is serving you food at the restaurant, okay? The waiter who is waiting and kind of taking your order, what is his role? So somebody said, take the order and serve you food. For me, no, that's the effort that he is taking. Okay. The outcome is when there is a brilliant smile on the customer and says, hey, thanks, I'm going to surely come back again. Okay. That's the difference between the effort and outcome. So, motion versus progress, effort versus outcome, I think so. This is very suboptimally understood by people as a mindset in the organization. You may acknowledge people for efforts, but are you in the right direction? You may not be at the destination, but are you moving in that right direction towards the destination? So these things get confused in that motion and progress. A lot of it's like being on the treadmill versus running and jogging on the field. Okay, you're moving in the marathon, moving ahead steadily, or you're just on the same place, putting a lot of efforts. Okay, so this is something which I would kind of talk about what needs to change as a mindset, or talking about past credentials, because people get caught into the past credentials saying, okay, I've been successful then, and now you're riling into that entire phase, not knowing that that is past. A new thing has come, a new progress has to be made every day. So this mindset is something which I would really want to be relooked at from a corporate mindset perspective,
Okay.
while there will be
So
many more also, Shweta.
sure, ma'am. Looking ahead, what changes do you believe will redefine leadership and organizational transformation over the next decade?
Let's imagine organizations. Let me talk about, we have always looked about traditional organizations, hierarchical organizations. Okay.
Yeah.
Take my word. I've been experimenting it for the last 2 decades and I'll continue to experiment in this area. We will not have any more hierarchical organizations. Titles will have gone off. Your experiential number of years would have gone off. Tomorrow, I may be a part of a team who's being led by a 5 year experience who brings that kind of a strength in that area. So that openness is going to require. So it's going to be more of self managed teams who are managing objectives rather than managing roles. It's not going to be about a role base, it's going to be more of capability based organizations that are going to get formed. So I want to deliver an objective. Which are the 5 people who need to come together to deliver it? So when I'm talking about the entire organizational, you're tearing down the organizational hierarchies and talking about more self-managed and objective-oriented designs for organizations. I look at what kind of a redefinition of a leadership and an organizational transformation would require, and I'll summarize it in 4 eyes for everyone. The first is the leadership will require a lot of ideation, the ability to think differently, the ability to see opportunities where they don't exist, okay, to the obvious eye. Okay. And that ideation would require a lot of experimentation, that would require a lot of insight, reflection, a lot of candid conversations. All that will become a part of it. Okay. The second part of taking the ideation into real time execution will require innovation. You will have to be innovative. And that leadership will be non negotiable. Someone who can actually innovate, someone who knows that there's a system to innovation or continuous improvement would be an extremely valuable and keep themselves relevant. The third is, if you're a functional leader, you're going to kind of become irrelevant in the longer course. And that's where my third eye comes in. That's the integration. Someone who can hold multi functions together. And that's the program management. Like for today, if I'm talking about performance management, it's not an HR function. It's about how every area of the organization integrates to deliver the business performance. So, similarly, every objective is going to get converted into a program which will require cross functional team members. So you're going to require integrators who can understand diverse areas rather than just a specialized area. For the specialized area, you can always ask AI something and it can give you all the expertise answers also. But someone who can take A, B, and C together and integrate and be able to say, hey, this is how it is now going to convert that idea into reality is really going to remain relevant as a leader. And while doing this, the fourth I is going to be very crucial, your ability to influence. And your ability to influence will come from your own content. You need content, a solid, you cannot be talking in the air. So, a lot of learning, unlearning, relearning, reading, researching, that depth, keep on going to the depth of the iceberg is going to be very important. Okay. Your ability to communicate. Influence requires your ability to communicate. You cannot just keep that thought in your process. You'll have to be able to structure your communication so that and simplify it so that people around you understand it. Okay. And that's where ideation, innovation, integration, and influence is going to be the redefinition of leadership for anyone and everyone. And you will see it happening in the next few years at an elevated pitch. That's how I would talk about how the human leadership would be making a real difference in this technologically enabled world.
So this would be my last question for today. So, finally, when people look back on your work years from now as a leader, mentor, and an entrepreneur, what would you hope they remember you for?
Definitely, that's a very deep question, and something for which I stepped out of a full time role also is to leave behind a legacy. So there's a purpose with which each one of us, I believe, are given this beautiful life. And when I kind of move on ahead in my life from this world to another world, definitely that legacy that I would have left behind is all about making a difference where actually I'm not required. Okay. And it's not only when I'm gone that they should remember me. Even today, if for me it's like a flowing river, I'm keeping on touching various shores. I'm touching a lot of founder led organizations. And at times I may move ahead. Okay. And if they don't need me anymore, is what is the legacy that I'm leaving behind? Okay. When they stand on their own and they're able to find of keep on rediscovering themselves and keep on growing and exploring their own potential, I think so that's the legacy that I want to leave behind. The moment they need me and kind of, if I'm taken out of that system and the system starts collapsing, then I've really not left a legacy behind. It's very fulfilling, Shweta, to see many of them come back even today to say, okay, you shared that framework with us, or you spoke about it, you spoke about this thought to us. Like the other day, a few months ago, I was talking to this founder and we were discussing a certain aspect, and I told him what he describes as aspiration to people is taken as desperation and interpretation of desperation by this team members or somebody whom he's recruiting, and then they feel that they are a messiah to actually save him, and then they try to overpower him, okay, in this entire thing. So somewhere that entire thing doesn't go in the right direction. Now, after a few months, we were discussing some other case study that he was facing. And then he said, Anupama, actually, I now remember that sentence. You had told me aspiration versus desperation. This actually applies in this situation, what happened with me right now. So, this is the legacy, where that small nuggets and bites also are left with people, or have touched their lives, which actually has helped them to become a better person, a better leader, and do something which really impacted further. So they themselves become mentors in the entire process, and I can move ahead. That's the entire legacy with which I would be love to be remembered as I move further in my life.
And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights with us. And it was a pleasure speaking to you.
Same here. Thank you. Look forward.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us and for sharing your valuable insights. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning into Leadership Lounge with the CEO Magazine podcast. Stay tuned for more such conversations with inspiring business leaders. Until next time, take care.